I'm Callum, 26 years old, and my mom, Diane, has always been the kind of person who enjoys power more than love. Her laugh wasn't warm, it was sharp, mocking, a reminder that I was always under her control. For years, I let her treat me like her property, but when she crossed one line too many, I learned how to flip the script. I came home early one Saturday and found strangers pawing through my things. My childhood trophies, my guitar, even my grandfather's coin collection were spread across folding tables in the driveway. My mom sat smugly in a lawn chair, barking prices like an auctioneer. The sight made my stomach drop. "$20 for the guitar," someone called out, waving a crumpled bill. I rushed over, panic rising in my chest. "Mom, what are you doing? These are my things!" She didn't even look at me, just grabbed the 20 and handed over my guitar, the one I'd saved for months to buy in high school. "Don't whine, Callum. You never use this junk anyway." I begged her to stop, my voice cracking with desperation, but she just laughed that cruel laugh and kept selling pieces of my life to strangers. I tried to pull my guitar back from the buyer's hands, but my mom shoved it firmly into his arms. Her laugh sliced through me like glass, sharp and cutting. She leaned close to my ear, her voice a venomous whisper. "My roof, my rules," she hissed. That phrase, her favorite weapon since I was a kid, felt like a slap across my face. Every time I tried to assert myself, every time I wanted something different, she'd use those 4 words to crush me back into submission. But this time felt different. Something inside me snapped. The buyer walked away with my guitar, leaving me standing there empty-handed and humiliated. Mom turned back to her customers, already haggling over my baseball trophies from middle school. She was enjoying this, the power, the control, the way she could destroy what mattered to me with a simple yard sale. I watched strangers rifle through my memories, paying pocket change for things that held years of my life. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. I didn't know how yet, but I swore that one day this wouldn't be her roof anymore. The seed of revenge had been planted. That night, I wandered through my room like a ghost, staring at empty shelves where my things used to be. The walls looked naked without my posters. My desk felt hollow without my grandfather's coin collection sitting in its special wooden box. Downstairs, I could hear my mom bragging to her friend Carol on the phone. She was practically giggling as she sipped her wine, boasting about making a couple $100 from my belongings. "You should have seen his face," she laughed, "like I'd murdered his puppy or something. So dramatic." My chest burned with rage. I thought about the coin collection alone, those silver dollars and wheat pennies that Grandpa had carefully collected over 60 years. I'd looked them up online once. They were worth thousands, not the $50 she'd gotten for them. She called it clutter. I called it betrayal. I sat on my stripped bed, staring at the ceiling, and made a decision. Betrayal demands repayment. She wanted to play games with my life? Fine. I'd learn to play games too. But when I was done, she wouldn't be laughing anymore. While she thought I was sulking in my room, I was actually at the library researching foreclosures. I'd always known she was reckless with money. Credit cards maxed out, bills scattered across the kitchen counter, shopping spree she couldn't afford. But I'd never thought much about what that meant for the house. Out of curiosity, I decided to check the county records online. My fingers trembled as I typed our address into the search bar. When the results loaded, my stomach flipped. She was months behind on the mortgage. Not just a little behind, seriously behind. The kind of behind that meant legal trouble. The kind that meant foreclosure proceedings could start any day. I printed out the documents with shaking hands, reading through the legal jargon. Terms like notice of default and acceleration clause jumped out at me. This wasn't just late payments. This was a ticking bomb. Suddenly, revenge wasn't just a fantasy brewing in my angry mind. It was possible. It was real. And maybe if I played my cards right, I could be the one to light the fuse. I walked home from the library with those papers hidden in my backpack, my heart pounding with possibility. I started picking up every extra shift I could at the hardware store. My manager, Bob, was happy to have the help, especially when I volunteered for the early morning inventory shifts that nobody else wanted. Every dollar I earned went straight into a secret savings account I opened at a different bank across town. I sold everything else she had already gotten rid of, my old bike, my gaming console, even my winter coat. I told her I was being minimalist, which made her roll her eyes. Only if she knew what I was really doing. At night, when she thought I was sleeping, I'd scroll through foreclosure listings on my phone like they were treasure maps. I studied the process, learned the terminology, figured out how the auction system worked. Knowledge was power, and for the first time in my life, I was gathering it for myself. Every time I felt like giving up, every time the guilt tried to creep in, I'd picture her laugh echoing in the driveway. I'd remember the satisfaction in her eyes as she handed my guitar to a stranger, the way she'd whispered, "My roof, my rules," like it was some kind of victory. Well, we'd see about that. The notice arrived on a Tuesday morning, buried under a stack of junk mail and flyers. I got to the mailbox before she did, my heart racing as I spotted the official-looking envelope from the mortgage company. "Notice of default," it read in bold letters across the top. My hands shook as I read through the legal language. She had 30 days to cure the default or face acceleration of the entire loan balance. After that would come the foreclosure proceedings. I found her in the kitchen scrolling through her phone while eating cereal. I handed her the notice, trying to keep my expression neutral. "What's this?" she asked, barely glancing at it. "Looks important," I said. She skimmed the first few lines, then waved it off dismissively. "They always send these scary letters to scare people into paying faster. It's just a tactic." She tossed it on the counter and went back to her phone. She had no idea this was real. The countdown had started, and for once, I wasn't scared. I was ready. I pocketed the notice when she wasn't looking. Evidence for later. I became an actor in my own home. At dinner, I smiled and nodded when she bragged to her friends about her latest shopping haul. I pretended to be clueless when she muttered about annoying late fees on her credit cards. I played the part of the oblivious son perfectly. But inside, I was watching everything. Every takeout order she placed instead of cooking. Every manicure appointment she couldn't really afford. Every careless swipe of her credit card at the mall. I was keeping mental notes of her financial destruction. "You've been in a better mood lately," she commented one evening, eyeing me suspiciously over her wine glass. "Just trying to stay positive," I replied with a shrug. She seemed satisfied with that answer. She had no idea I knew she was standing on quicksand, and every purchase she made was just digging her deeper. Every dollar she wasted brought her closer to losing everything. Let her laugh. Let her believe she was still in control. I was planning something she never saw coming. The fall would sting so much more when she realized who had orchestrated it. At the courthouse, I sat in the records office, sweating in my button-down shirt and trying to look like I belonged there. The clerk barely looked up when I requested to see the foreclosure proceedings for my address. She handed me a thick folder with a bored expression. "Court fees are due by 5, she mumbled. I flipped through page after page of legal documents until I found what I was looking for. The official auction date for our house, printed in black and white. My childhood home would be sold on the courthouse steps in 6 weeks. My chest tightened, but not from fear. For the first time, I could see the path forward, clear, sharp, and perfect. Every detail was laid out like a blueprint. The minimum bid, the terms of sale, the exact time and location. I folded the paper carefully and slipped it into my pocket. This was more than just information. This was the blueprint to my revenge. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt different, powerful. For 26 years, I'd been under her thumb, following her rules, living in her shadow. But now I had something she didn't even know existed. A plan. At night, lying in my stripped-down bedroom, guilt would whisper to me in the darkness. Was I really going to let my own mother lose her house? Was I really that cruel? But then I'd remember her calling me pathetic when I cried over my dog Max dying. I was 12, and she'd laughed at my tears, telling me to grow up and stop being such a baby. Or the time she threw away my college acceptance letters because she didn't want me to leave town. Or selling my grandfather's coins for pennies when she knew how much they meant to me. She wasn't really a mother, not the kind that nurtures and protects. She was a tyrant who used love as a weapon and control as a shield. She'd stolen years of my happiness, my confidence, my sense of self-worth. I wasn't stealing from her. I was taking back what she'd stolen from me. The guilt would fade, replaced by determination. She'd made her choice every time she'd hurt me, every time she'd laughed at my pain. Now I was making mine. This wasn't about the house. It was about justice. The hardware store wasn't paying enough to reach my goal, so I picked up a second job delivering food at night. I told my mom I was hanging out with friends, and she barely seemed to care. She was too busy planning her next shopping trip to pay attention to my schedule. I'd drive around town with bags of takeout, collecting tips that I'd stuff into an old cereal box hidden in my closet. Every crumpled dollar bill, every handful of change, every electronic tip that hit my account, it all went toward the same goal. Some nights I'd count the money by flashlight, whispering to myself like a prayer. This is for the guitar. This is for the coins. This is for every time you made me feel worthless. My savings account grew slowly but steadily. $20 here, $50 there. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Money she didn't know about, couldn't control, couldn't take away. The physical exhaustion felt good. Working 2 jobs meant I barely had time to think about anything else. It kept the anger sharp and focused, like fuel for a fire that would soon burn bright enough for her to see. One night, I was getting home from a delivery shift when I heard her on the phone with Carol, her voice shaking in a way I'd never heard her before. "I'm just a little behind on things," she was saying, trying to sound casual but failing. "You know how it is with the holidays coming up. Everything will work out. It always does." I stopped in the hallway, hidden in the shadows, listening to her lie. No, I don't need help. I'll catch up soon, maybe take on some extra clients at the salon." I almost laughed out loud. She was a part-time receptionist at a nail salon, not some high-powered business owner. The extra clients she was talking about might bring in an additional $100 a month. She owed thousands. I wanted to burst into the room and tell her exactly how screwed she was. "Behind? You're about to lose everything, and you don't even know it." But I bit my tongue. Better to let her believe she was still in control. The fall would sting so much more when reality finally hit, and I'd be there to watch every second of it. I started attending foreclosure auctions just to watch and learn. Every Saturday morning, I'd drive to the courthouse and sit in the back observing how the process worked. Men in expensive suits would raise numbered paddles, and entire houses would be sold in minutes. I felt small and out of place among these professional investors, but I paid attention to everything. Who spoke up during the bidding? Who stayed quiet? What happened when someone couldn't pay? Knowledge was power, and I was hungry for both. The first auction I attended, a little old lady lost her house to a man in a BMW. She stood off to the side crying while he signed papers, treating her lifetime of memories like just another business transaction. I felt sick watching it, but I also learned something important. Emotions had no place in this room. If I was going to do this, I had to be cold, calculating. I had to think like them, like the investors who saw houses as numbers on a spreadsheet instead of homes where people lived and loved and lost. I could do that. She'd taught me how to turn my heart to stone. At one auction, an older man with kind eyes noticed me taking notes in a small notebook. "First time?" he asked with a gentle smile. I admitted I was just learning, trying to sound more confident than I felt. He introduced himself as Frank and told me stories of buying foreclosures, fixing them up, and selling them for profit. "Been doing this for 20 years, he said. "Best advice I can give you, don't get emotional. The house doesn't care who lived there before. The bank doesn't care about sob stories. You can't either, or it'll ruin you." I nodded, scribbling notes, but inside I was thinking, this is all emotion. Every dollar I've saved, every extra shift I've worked, every sleepless night planning this, it's all emotion. And that's exactly what's going to make me win. Frank was right about one thing, though. I couldn't let guilt or sympathy stop me when the moment came. When that gavel fell, when my childhood home was on the block, I had to be ready to bid like she was nothing to me, just like she had always treated me. Despite months of saving and working double shifts, I was still short of what I might need for the auction. The math was brutal. Even if the bidding started low, it could spiral quickly if multiple investors showed interest. So I did something that terrified me. I walked into the bank and applied for a personal loan. The loan officer was a woman about my age who barely looked up from her computer screen as she processed my application. I sat there sweating, convinced she'd see right through me, that somehow she'd know what I was planning. "What's the loan for?" she asked in a bored voice. "Investment opportunity," I said, which wasn't technically a lie. She typed for a few more minutes, then looked up with surprise. "Well, your credit is excellent and your employment history looks stable. We can approve this." My hands shook as I left the bank with the paperwork. For the first time, I had real buying power, real money to make this happen. This wasn't just a fantasy anymore, it was a plan with funding. Walking to my car, I felt like I was carrying dynamite in my pocket. Back home, my mom was practically glowing with excitement over a new designer handbag she'd bought. She waved it at me like a trophy, her eyes sparkling with the same joy other people reserved for major life achievements. "Isn't it gorgeous?" she gushed, turning it this way and that in the light. "It was on sale, only $300. "Only $300, I smiled, forced and tight, while thinking, that bag might be worth more than what you'll have in a few months. She seemed to expect some kind of reaction from me, maybe jealousy or admiration. When I didn't give her what she wanted, she rolled her eyes and called me boring. "You have no appreciation for nice things," she said with a sneer. It was almost fun now, watching her waste money, like watching someone rearrange deck chairs on the Titanic. Every purchase she made was another nail in her own coffin, and she was hammering them in with a smile. Let her buy her bags and her shoes and her expensive dinners. Let her live in her fantasy world where money was infinite and consequences didn't exist. Reality was coming whether she was ready or not. The night before the auction, I barely slept. My savings and loan money had been converted into a cashier's check, and it sat on my nightstand in a manila envelope like a loaded gun. I stared at it till my eyes burned. Everything I'd worked for, every sacrifice I'd made, every humiliation I'd endured, it all came down to tomorrow morning. If I failed, I'd lose everything and still be trapped under her roof. If I succeeded, she would lose everything instead. The symmetry was almost poetic. At dawn, I got dressed in my best shirt and pants, trying to look like someone who belonged in a room full of real estate investors. I slipped the envelope into my jacket pocket, feeling its weight against my chest. In the kitchen, my mom was making coffee, humming some song from the radio. She looked happy, carefree, completely oblivious to the fact that this might be her last morning in this house. "You're up early," she commented, not really caring about the answer. "Yeah, big day." She had no idea how big. The courthouse basement smelled like old carpet and stale coffee. Dozens of people sat in folding chairs with numbered paddles, looking like they had done this 100 times before. Real estate investors, house flippers, bargain hunters, all waiting to pick apart someone's financial corpse. My chest pounded as the auctioneer, a thin man with a bored expression, rattled off the rules and procedures. I tried to look calm, but my hands were shaking so badly I had to sit on them. Property after property went up for bid. Houses, condos, empty lots, each one representing someone's dreams that had turned into nightmares. The auctioneer's voice was monotone, mechanical, turning human tragedy into business transactions. Then he said it, our address, my childhood home, the place where I had learned to walk, lost my first tooth, and had my heart broken for the first time. My hands gripped the paddle so tightly my knuckles went white. This was it. This was the moment I'd been working toward for months. Around me, investors shuffled papers and adjusted their glasses. To them, this was just another property. To me, this was justice. Opening bid is $15,000, the auctioneer announced. The number was shockingly low, less than my mom spent on shopping in 6 months. A few hands went up around the room and the price started climbing. $20,000, $25,000, $30,000. My stomach churned as I watched other people bid on my childhood. These investors didn't know about the treehouse in the backyard or the growth marks on the kitchen doorframe. They just saw square footage and potential profit. $35,000, $40,000. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew I had to bid soon or risk being priced out entirely. The auctioneer's eyes swept the room looking for the next raise. I lifted my paddle with a hand that trembled like a leaf. $45,000. Every head in the room turned toward me. I felt their eyes examining me, trying to figure out if I was serious competition or just some kid in over his head. The auctioneer's hammer hovered in the air. I have 45. Do I hear 50? This was really happening. I was bidding on my own house. The bidding continued, climbing higher and higher. 50,000, 55, 60. A man in an expensive suit kept raising his paddle, and I could see the confidence in his eyes. He thought he had this in the bag. He had no idea he was bidding against someone who would pay anything, everything, to win this. 65,000, 70. My palms were sweating, but I kept raising my paddle. Every bid felt like another step toward freedom, another step toward justice. At 75,000, the man in the suit hesitated. He looked at me, trying to read my face, trying to figure out how high I'd go. I stared back with all the determination I could muster. He raised his paddle again. 80,000. I countered immediately. 85. The room was getting quieter. Other bidders had dropped out, sensing this was between me and him now. The auctioneer looked back and forth between us like he was watching a tennis match. He studied his papers, calculating profit margins in his head. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he shook his head and lowered his paddle. 85,000, going once, going twice. I couldn't breathe. Sold! The gavel cracked against wood like a gunshot, and just like that, I owned the house. My knees almost buckled under the weight of what had just happened. People around me started packing up their papers, moving on to the next auction, the next opportunity. But I sat frozen in my chair, staring at the number on my paddle. I'd done it! I'd actually done it! The auctioneer's assistant appeared beside me with a clipboard full of paperwork. "Congratulations," she said, in a business-like tone. "You'll need to finalize payment within 24 hours. I signed document after document in a daze, my hand moving automatically while my brain tried to process what I had accomplished. After what felt like hours, she handed me a folder containing the deed. My name, on her house, on my house. I walked out of the courthouse into blinding afternoon sunlight, holding the papers like they were made of gold. For the first time in my life, I felt taller than her laugh, and I couldn't wait for her to find out who had beaten her at her own game. Revenge had a sound, and it was a judge's gavel falling. A week later, the official notice arrived at our door via certified mail. I happened to be in the kitchen when the mailman knocked, and I watched through the window as my mom signed for it with a confused expression. She tore open the envelope right there on the front porch, and I saw her face drain of all color as she read the first few lines. Her hands started shaking. She stumbled back inside, clutching the paper like it might bite her. "This can't be right," she mumbled, reading and rereading the legal language. Then she started screaming. "Those bastards! Those crooked banks! This is illegal! This is theft!" I stood in the doorway of the kitchen, watching her meltdown with perfect calm. She was ranting about unfairness, about corruption, about how the system was rigged against honest people. She had no idea the person who'd bought her house was standing 10 feet away, listening to every word. The crook she was looking for was me. Over the next few days, she became desperate in ways I'd never seen her before. She called every lawyer in town, but none of them would take her case, especially not when they learned she'd ignored months of default notices. Then she turned to me. "Callum, honey," she said, her voice sweetly manipulative in a way that made my skin crawl. Tears streamed down her face, and for a moment she almost looked like the mother I'd wished she could have been when I was little. "Please," she begged, "help me out just this once. I'll pay you back, I promise. I just need enough to catch up on the payments." My jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. After everything she'd done to me, she wanted me to save her? She wanted me to use my hard-earned money to bail her out of the mess she created? "Sorry," I said, my voice steady as stone. Watching her face crumble was almost better than confessing the truth. Almost. The sheriff arrived on a gray Tuesday morning, official and unstoppable. He handed her the eviction notice with professional courtesy, while she alternated between sobbing and cursing. A moving truck pulled up behind his patrol car, and suddenly our quiet street became a spectacle. Neighbors gathered on their porches and peered through curtains as strangers began boxing up her life. She fought them every step of the way, screaming about her rights and demanding to see paperwork. But the sheriff was patient and thorough, showing her every legal document that gave him the authority to remove her from the premises. I stood quietly in the background, holding my folder of ownership papers, watching the show she was putting on for the entire neighborhood. When she spotted me with the deed in my hands, she froze mid-scream. Her eyes focused on the official-looking documents, and I saw the exact moment when recognition dawned. Her face twisted, not in shock, but in a terrible understanding. She knew. Somehow she knew. The woman who'd always been so quick with cruel words found herself speechless. She just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "You?" she whispered, pointing at me with a trembling finger. The word came out like an accusation, like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. But I could see in her eyes that she was starting to piece it all together. My extra shifts, my secretive behavior, the way I'd been so calm about her financial troubles. I didn't flinch. After months of planning and years of abuse, I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "It's my house now," I said, my voice steady and clear. For a moment, she just stared at me. Then she started to laugh, that same sharp, cruel laugh that had haunted me for years. But this time, it was different. It wasn't the sound of someone in control anymore. It was hollow, broken, the laugh of someone who had finally, truly lost. "My own son," she said, shaking her head in disbelief. "My own son bought my house out from under me." "Your own son, who you never treated like a son." The movers kept working around us, packing up her belongings while neighbors whispered and stared. Her kingdom was crumbling, and everyone could see it happening. When the dust finally settled, I stood alone in the empty living room. My living room now. The silence was deafening after years of her voice echoing through these walls, commanding, criticizing, controlling. No more laughter that cut like knives, no more "my roof, my rules," no more walking on eggshells in my own home. I dropped my bag on the hardwood floor and let the quiet wash over me like a healing balm. For the first time in my 26 years of life, I wasn't living under her shadow. I wasn't following her rules or seeking her approval. She was gone, and I was free. The house felt different already, lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted from its very foundation. These walls had seen too much pain, too much cruelty disguised as love. But maybe now they could see something different. Maybe now they could see peace. I walked through each room slowly, remembering the boy who used to hide in these corners, who used to dream of escape. He didn't have to hide anymore. He didn't have to dream of freedom. He'd taken it for himself, $1 at a time, one shift at a time, one small act of rebellion that grew into something she never saw coming. The house was mine. The victory was mine. And for the first time in my life, so was my future. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like this video, comment, and smash the subscribe button. Also check out other videos on the channel. We've got more interesting stories for you.